Hello, and welcome to a guided reading lesson plan by Daniel Chenault. So, the chosen literature that we will be using for this guided reading plan will be Al Capone Does My Shirts by Jennifer Cheldenko. Now, this is a recommended text for the sixth grade, but it is also a historically relevant piece of information as we can reference Al Capone and his crimes, we can talk about Alcatraz, we can talk about the prison system during this time. So, leaves us a lot of opportunities for research and other activities to build upon as we work through this lesson. So, what is a guided reading? So, a guided reading is a research based method that teachers use in the classroom with students at a similar reading level, such as the sixth grade. The development of each student's reading competency is supported by the teacher through regular assessment and observation of each student. An increase in reading proficiency of each student is the ultimate goal. This can be done through a variety of methods. The method chosen for this particular lesson will be close reading. As students read, they will closely observe and interpret information as it appears in the text. They will reread and reflect on the text to build new inferences and make changes to old ones. So, the standards and objectives that this lesson will focus upon. The first one is 6.1. So, students will cite textual evidence and make relevant connections to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. 6.2. Students will determine a theme or central idea of a text and how it is conveyed through particular details. Provide a summary of the text distinct from personal opinions or judgments. So the objective of this overall lesson will be that students will activate prior knowledge on first-person narrative text, generate predictions based on a short research activity and chapter titles, generate inferences based on the readings done of the first three chapters, participate in group discussions, and finally complete an outline in order to begin writing their own personal narrative stories. So the first stage of this will be reading preparation. This will have 5 parts to it: activating and building prior knowledge, preview of the text and making predictions, vocabulary, and finally purpose for reading. So a short discussion will be conducted to activate prior knowledge on identifying the characteristics of a first-person narrative text. Elements such as first-person point of view, lack of knowledge of thoughts or views of other characters, and pronouns usage will be discussed. Students will then review the front and back covers, title of the book, and the title of the chapters 1 through 3 along. They will then engage in a short, partnered research activity in order to activate prior and build new knowledge on information referenced in the book. Both of these activities will be used to conduct some predictions on the book. For the partnered research, students will be asked if anyone is familiar with Al Capone as a historical figure. Based on responses, students will engage in light research with a partner as to who Al Capone was, for what he might have been imprisoned, where he was imprisoned, and also how the Alcatraz prison functioned. Research will be guided towards his incarceration in the Alcatraz prison and the guards whom would be living there with their families. Once the majority of students have gathered sufficient information, the class will shift to a teacher-guided discussion, sharing and synthesis of prior knowledge and gathered information. Key information will be listed on the board for students to record and use to make additional predictions and possible inferences. Once prior knowledge and new knowledge have been shared, the teacher will read the first 2 pages and the presented characters will be identified. Characters will then be discussed and listed. New characters will be added as the reading progresses. Students will then be allotted time to make predictions based on prior knowledge and information gathered. Predictions will then be discussed as a class and recorded for future reference. Preview of the text and making predictions. The teacher will then conduct a picture walk through the book and discuss the images provided as they appear in the text. Students will make predictions based on the images and the predictions will be collected and listed. Personal connections will be made periodically through the discussion as they arise. Reference will be made to prior predictions from the research activity and will be discussed as to whether or not they remain valid or plausible. Any new predictions or changes to prior predictions will be noted and shared with the students. Vocabulary. Prior to the commencement of reading preparation, the teacher will review the first chapter of the text and create a list of important vocabulary words to discuss. Careful attention will be paid in the location of each vocabulary word and the context in which it is found in order to elicit discussion at the moment the word is encountered. Students will try to prepare a definition for the words based on the text, and clarification will be offered in order to formulate a solid definition with which to move forward. Additional words that students might find difficult will be added to the vocabulary as reading progresses. Purpose for reading. Students will focus on the question of how can we persevere through obstacles? Students will be asked to periodically identify moments where the protagonist had to persevere through an obstacle and reflect on moments in their own lives. The purpose presented during this reading is to further develop an understanding of the structure of a first-person narrative text so the students may engage in a personal narrative writing later on. Students will be encouraged to evaluate the text presented and make further predictions as well as inferences as the text progresses and periodically identify elements of a first-person narrative. Students will also be asked to periodically review class predictions to identify at what point certain predictions begin to gain more support or lose validity. Stage 2 is a close reading. So the teacher will then conduct a close reading of the first 3 chapters with the students and will assist struggling readers with certain vocabulary that may otherwise present an obstacle. The teacher will pause as previously identified vocabulary appears in the text, at which point students will prepare a definition for the word based on the text, and clarification will be offered in order to formulate a solid definition with which to move forward. The teacher will also pause periodically to present supportive examples of first-person narration as they appear in the text in order to further support the development of a thorough comprehension of a first-person narrative. Examples such as lack of knowledge of other characters' thoughts or feelings, observations and assumptions of the main character, first-person point of view sentence structure, and prior knowledge of the narrator/main character will be a general focus. Stage 3 will be responding. It was broken down into 3 parts: revisiting the purpose of reading, clarification of vocabulary and concepts, and support of deeper comprehension. Revisiting the purpose of reading. After the reading, the teacher will engage students in a discussion, revisiting some of the examples of first-person narrative presented during the reading aloud. These examples will be discussed and synthesized in order to paint a clear image of the elements of a first-person narrative. The teacher will present synthesized information to the class to be noted. Clarification of vocabulary and concepts. Vocabulary that presented itself during the reading will also be revisited, and students will be asked to demonstrate usage of vocabulary in a more relevant context. At this point, the teacher will engage students in discussion as well as present new questions about the reading. Students will be asked their thoughts about Moose's life and situation and what life might be like for them if they were to live on the island, or what it might be like to go to school under these circumstances. Evaluations and predictions made about the text will be revisited, and students will discuss, revise, eliminate, and create new predictions based on new information gained. Support of deeper comprehension. The teacher will also use this opportunity to reinforce the many elements of plot, such as expedition, conflict, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, characters, settings, and background. Students will be asked to identify specific elements within the story to use as examples of the various elements of the plot. Stage 4, direct instruction lesson and reread. A direct instruction lesson will be given introducing writing in the first-person narrative form. This will help refresh students' memories on identifying point of view in a text, as well as maintaining consistency in point of view in their own writing. It will also focus on specific elements that help build a strong story when writing a first-person narrative. At the conclusion of the direct instruction lesson, students will begin an independent reread of the first 3 chapters of the story with special focus on elements of a first-person narrative. And finally, stage 5, which is applying knowledge and writing. Once the class as a whole has completed the second reading of the first 3 chapters, students will begin a first-person narrative writing assignment. They will select either a personal experience in their own life or an imaginary experience they wish to have. Each student will write their story from the viewpoint of the main character, and it may take place in the present or the past. Students will only be expected to write the exposition, identifying the background, setting, a possible conflict, and characters of the story in order to build upon later as we progress as a class further through the next few chapters of the text. Students will be given a blank plot diagram in order to begin outlining their story.